Hello everybody, my name is Michael with Retro Vibe Repairs, and today we have what I'm going to call a comparison video. So the story is that a couple months ago I built this Sega Game Gear. Now I pulled the chips out of a factory Game Gear and put them on a new motherboard, as well as installed a bunch of other parts and basically made this thing into a modern Game Gear. So you might notice that the only thing that is not aftermarket inside of this smoke black case is the power board. And it hasn't bothered me that much, but I did want to put a non-factory board in there as well, just to make this thing, completely modded out, just to really seal the deal and make this thing a modern Game Gear. So I started looking around for several different power boards and found multiple different options. And I figured it would be fun to get several of them in several different price ranges and bring them all here in front of you guys to compare and contrast and figure out which one I'm going to end up putting inside my console. However, I really like this one, and some of the power boards we are going to be using are I don't know how to put this, but I don't trust them. So I'm not going to be using this one. I'm actually going to be using this one. So this is a Game Gear that does work, but not to the point where I would consider selling it or using it full time. So it is a perfect tester for some of these power boards that I'm not 100% sure on. So we are going to go ahead and get it taken apart so we can look at the stock power board that's in this. So here's the plan. I have taken this console and basically split it in half. I have a soundboard hooked up to it, so I don't have to worry about the back half of it. And we are going to be testing out several different power boards here in varying degrees of quality and from many different manufacturers. So the plan here is to just go down the list, and in order to compare, you guys are getting removed from the stand for a second. We are going to be using this up here. In order to test this, we are going to be using my Handtech DSO 2D15 oscilloscope. If you don't know what an oscilloscope is, it basically is a tool that is used to measure oscillations, basically variations in a signal or waveforms that are used in various different electronics. I'm going to keep it brief, just so that way I don't have to go into too much detail, but I can go into detail in a later video where I talk about all the tools that I use for these types of videos. But for the purpose of today, we are going to be using this to measure voltage ripple. Voltage ripple is basically a variation in the voltage. You can see right here that this line is going up and down very quickly. In a perfect world, you don't want anything at all. You want this to be perfectly straight. However, due to all sorts of different components used in electrical devices, that is not practical. So we want to keep this as low as possible. So for the purpose of today, we are going to be using this oscilloscope to measure the peak-to-peak voltage on each of these, just to see how well they all clean up the voltage signal from my power supply here. So basically, we are going to be using that oscilloscope to measure how well all of these devices manage their power and which one I'm going to be ending up using in my modded Game Gear. Now, there's a couple qualifications here. Of course, power regulation is the most important, but which one also has the best build quality is also very important to me as well. So we're going to get started and look at our stock power regulators first. Now you might notice that I have two power regulators here. Now this is very important for the purpose of this experiment because, as some of you may know, the Game Gear has inherently faulty capacitors. Over time, these capacitors will fail and they will stop regulating power as well. So what I have here is I have one power board that has been recapped and has had its capacitors replaced, and we have another one that has not had its capacitors replaced. The purpose of this is basically this power board here with its capacitors replaced should theoretically be the best at regulating power because it was designed in the 90s for the Game Gear specifically. And we are going to be testing this one just to verify how far that regulation drops over time when these capacitors start to age. However, the main idea here is to either beat or perfectly match the specs that are coming out of this power board here. Starting off, we are going to be looking at the Retro 6 Game Gear Power Core, the economical power board replacement for your Game Gear, powered by AA batteries or USB-C. I have already opened this, as you can see, just to make sure everything's in here, but I'm going to open it again on camera. I like the packaging a lot. It is very simple and looks very professional, so I'm going to give Retro 6 a point for that. Moving on to the product itself. Now, we have a 3D printed insert because, as you can see, this one actually is using USB-C rather than the barrel jack that is present on the stock power boards. So that is immediately an upgrade for me. You just put this right over it and it slots into the case. I do appreciate that they included this 3D printed insert with it. That is very nice. I'm going to be putting it up here so we can take a closer look at this board. So we are going to take a closer look at this version 1.01 power core developed by Retro 6. So the first thing I notice, it is the classic Retro 6 white with a thicker board size that I have come to expect. The entire thing is put together very well and just has the classic Retro 6 quality that I have come to expect with the multiple products that I have ordered from them over the years. The first off is the battery springs are very tough. I'm putting a decent amount of force on them and they are not bending, unlike some of the others that we will see later in this video. This board also has over and under voltage protection as well as over and under current protection. That is very nice to hear because that means this board will protect your console from any sort of mishaps that may happen and will keep it running in the long term. It also has a power on LED as well as a low battery LED. I'm not sure if those are the same or if the low battery LED is located somewhere else on this board that I'm not seeing, but the inclusion of both of these LEDs is very nice to have, so that way you know that everything is working as expected. It also has USB-C, which I greatly appreciate, adding this more modern universal standard to these older retro consoles. And the final thing is we can also use this resistor. If we remove this resistor, we can disable the 34-volt rail that is used on these older backlit screens. If you are using a more modern IPS or LCD screen, you do not need this 34-volt rail, so it is good to just go ahead and disable it by removing this resistor. I really appreciate that about this design, and overall, this is a very high quality product. I'm just now noticing as well, all of these pins are labeled, which is very nice. If you're pinning it out, you can see what pin is supposed to have what voltage. That is a nice detail I did not notice until just now, so good on them. If I had to make a guess, I would say that this one is probably going to be the best. I did pick this one up for about $24.21 in American US dollars, and I ordered it on the 22nd and it arrived on the 27th of October with very quick shipping. I greatly appreciate that, as well as the communication from Retro 6 as well. This is a very high quality product, and I do imagine that this one is going to be the best in this entire video. But we're going to look at its competitors. Coming up next, we have this board that I ordered off of AliExpress. It doesn't seem to have any sort of brand name, but it does look well made. I ordered it for about $15.39 and ordered it on October 22nd, and it arrived November 1st. So as it is AliExpress, the shipping did take a little bit longer. But let's get it out and have a look at it. So getting a closer look up at this board, it is a version 2.0 of some kind. Oh, hello. Oh, it appears to be a Funny Playing Retro Power Game Gear version 2.0. I have heard of these. I've never actually used one before. The AliExpress listing didn't say that it was a Funny Playing board, so that is very interesting. Let me do some research real quick. So, from what I can determine, this is an authentic Funny Playing board. It looks very identical to the original. If it is not, it is a very good clone. But overall, I'm going to treat it as it is a Funny Playing board. And if it is not, then someone can correct me in the comments and I will adjust the video accordingly. But for right now, we are going to treat it as a Funny Playing board because it's a carbon copy of what I'm seeing online. So, this is a Funny Playing Retro Power Game Gear version 2.0. Says it is a low ripple Game Gear power board with IPS mod support. As we look it over, you can see it has significantly more components than the Retro 6 board. It does have electrolytic capacitors, as well as some ceramic ones, whereas the Retro 6 one had only ceramics, which is very nice because it means we'll never have to change those out, whereas in several years these may go bad and start to dry out and we may have to replace them. I do like the black color of the motherboard as well as the USB-C. However, I am noticing, I'm not sure if you see that, but this USB-C port looks crooked by a couple angles. I'm not really sure if you can see that, but if I try and line it up with something with a straight edge, this port looks a little bit crooked, which is very interesting. Not a deal breaker though, but it is interesting that this port is a little bit crooked. Looking over, it does claim to be ultra low ripple, as well as claims to have protection for your device like the Retro 6 one. One bonus that it does have is it does have the ability to flip this switch to disable the 34-volt rail, whereas on the Retro 6 one, you had to go ahead and just remove an entire resistor, which you may end up losing and you may not be able to restore that functionality. However, counterpoint is usually once you install these, you're either going to use them with the 34 volts or you're not. You're usually not going to be pulling these out. But I would have appreciated to see that switch on the Retro 6 one as well. However, it is not a huge deal breaker for either console, just something I prefer. I do like this switch, so that way you can go back and forth if needed. Overall, the board is a little bit thinner than the Retro 6 one, but overall does not feel too bad. The battery springs are very tough as well, so I can appreciate that. I would have no problems putting this in my console at all, and really have no complaints. This is a very generic board, and I don't have any issues with it. And last but not least, we have what I'm going to refer to as the AliExpress special. So this board was a whopping $5.66. It was ordered on October 22nd, just like the other ones, and arrived on November 4th, 3 days after the Funny Playing one. Shipping time was not too bad, but it did arrive in this bag, which, yeah. So now that we've got it out, the packaging was pretty lackluster. Actually, when I first got this in, the battery post was bent way back, and I was able to bend it back into place. Actually, now that I'm looking at this, I notice these battery contacts are actually not fully seated the way they should be. These feet should be fully touching the board. Hold on, I'm going to fix that real quick. Alright, so now that we have fixed the battery springs, yeah, those feel a lot better. Still a little wobbly though, but nothing horrible. I mean, there's a piece of plastic that goes in here anyways that stops these from moving, so I'm not too concerned about it. Overall, this is a very generic board, even more basic than the stock board. There's really not much to look at here. We've got a couple electrolytic capacitors, 2 inductors, and this main voltage regulator here. This is also disgusting. Well, it's not perfect, but that's about as good as it's going to get. That was disgusting. Overall, this is a very basic board, and there's not really much to discuss about it. I couldn't really find too much information on it. It does look like the high-speedito version of this board, but I'm not seeing any high-speedito markings on it, so I'm not going to claim this as a high-speedito product, but it does look very similar to a high-speedito one, so I'm not sure if this is a very cheap clone, but overall it's very basic, and I'm going to refer to this as the AliExpress special, because there aren't really a lot of options on here. I don't even think there's the option to disable the 34 volt rail, no USB-C, basic barrel jack. Actually, I don't even think this is... Yeah, this isn't even the same barrel jack size as the stock Game Gear, so I don't even think this will work with the stock Game Gear power wall wart, so that's interesting. This is just basic. There's no... these pins here are very basic. There's absolutely no like bezel or clip-in point like there is on every single one of these other boards. This white bezel here, these are just open pins, no slot to slot into. Honestly, I'm not impressed. I mean, I know you get what you pay for. It was $5, but honestly, I'm not impressed. Will it get the job done? Probably, but there's only one way to find out. So we have quite the lineup here. Overall, I am most preferring this Retro 6-1 here, with this Funny Playing one as a close second. This one doesn't even cut it. Honestly, I'm not impressed. I know you get what you pay for, but honestly, I wouldn't pay for this. But we are going to go ahead and get started by hooking all of these up to a Game Gear and seeing how the Game Gear runs under load and what the overall voltage ripple on each of these is going to be. Alright, we're going to apply 9 volts, which is the standard battery voltage, and we're going to flip the power switch. Right away, I can see a very nice purple LED, which is very nice to see. Just shows us that the console is working. Do hear sound. Not seeing any sort of anomalies on the screen. Oh, actually, no, that's because the capacitors in this thing are... I didn't do a great job on this recap on this console. This was one of my first recaps, actually, and I did not do a great job. So any of that you see, that's just the console. That is nothing to do with any of these products that we're going to be using. I'm going to move this out of the way. But overall, it works. I'm not seeing any sort of screen flickering. Now I'm going to go ahead and use my oscilloscope probe here to measure the voltage ripple on this 10 volt 100 microfarad capacitor. This is the main input capacitor, so anything I measure will be the voltage that this board cleans up. Going to go ahead and hook up our Funny Playing one here. Like I said, I don't think we'll have any issues with this one either. It looks well made, and honestly, Funny Playing is one of the better manufacturers out there as well. I use Funny Playing products all the time, so I'm fairly confident that this will work just fine. We are going to send this thing 9 volts as expected from our bench power supply. And looks like we have no major issues. Don't have any sound though. There we go. Wheel was just turned down. So overall, this thing works good. Don't see any screen flickering, don't hear any hum from the speaker. So overall, it looks good to me. Last and honestly probably least is this AliExpress special Game Gear power board. So we're going to go ahead and hook it up. Oh, that's interesting. I bet I can just hold on. What I'm noticing is, like I mentioned earlier, there is no special plug that this fits into. This is just blank pins. So I bet you I can just hook this up either which way, can't I? That's the right way. And if I flip it around, hold on. Wow. That's bad. You should not be able to do that on these. Luckily, it wasn't powered on. But if we look at our wonderful little markings that are on this Retro 6 board, we can see that this pin right here, the one that is further away from everything else, is our 34-volt rail. That's not good. If I'm going to be honest, you should not be able to flip this around because, as you can see, 34 volts on this end, 5 volts on this end. If you plugged this thing in backwards, you would send 34 volts down the 5-volt rail, and that would effectively fry the console. That is an impressive oversight. That's not acceptable. We're going to go ahead and hook it up the right way and give it a shot and hopefully not fry the console. Thank you for your service, Game Gear, and allowing us to be a little sketchy with you. Applying 9 volts. Okay, it turned on. No smoke. All right. That is good to hear. We're going to get a game boot. There we go. Oh, there's screws stuck to the speaker. That's why it sounded weird. Well, it turned on. No screen flickering. No any major issues. Shh. No major issues that I can see. It works. So I will give it that. And that is all I will give it. It works. So I'm going to turn this thing off before it fries my console. So here is our final lineup. From the best to the worst. Actually, that doesn't make sense. So here is our final lineup. We're going to start from the worst and move to the best in ascending order. So starting off with the worst, in my opinion, is the AliExpress Special, as we're going to call it, also known as Powerboard Sega Game Gear, unidentified manufacturer. From its incorrect terminals that can fry the console if hooked up backwards, to this barrel jack that doesn't even fit the stock Game Gear power adapter. I give this thing a fail all around. For $5, I wouldn't even pay $5 for this, honestly. It's if they were to put the guard on that would protect it from being hooked up backwards, I can consider paying $5 for it. The recommendations I would make is put on that guard and make the power jack actually the stock one. Honestly, this is trash. Next up, we have our non-recapped power board. Ignore the corrosion; it's fine. Don't worry about it. We have our stock non-recapped power board. It's basic, it does the job, and I have no complaints. It needs to be recapped, but it does the job just fine. Next is our stock recapped power board. It does the job great, just like the non-recapped one. Only difference is it it has a little bit better power management. So honestly, it does the job great, and if you have one of these installed in the console, it does the job just fine. And it comes back down to these two final contestants. Overall, I really do like this funny playing one, and it does a great job of managing power. It is low ripple, like it said, but it does underperform compared to a recapped stock power board. It does just slightly worse. So it's not that big of a deal, which is why I put it above the stock power board, because I do like the USB-C, as well as the ability to turn on and off the 34-volt rail. I would almost put these as a tie, honestly. Overall, it's not bad. I like it, but if they could get that voltage down to stock, it would be a very great competitor. And last but most certainly not least is our winner, the Retro 6 Power Core. Like I said when I was looking at it initially, I just really like this thing. It looks very fleshed out and was well designed. I like the LEDs, the USB-C, the over and under voltage and current protection. Everything on this is just well thought out. The only dock I really have on this thing is this 34-volt resistor. I feel like it would have been pretty easy to just put a switch in, but I understand they had to put this resistor in to keep the costs down. Like I said, not big of a deal, but if I'm going to be fair, I do have to nitpick a little bit. So, this is our winner. This is what we are going to be installing into our Game Gear, our modded Game Gear. So, let's go ahead and get started with that. And this little USB-C insert slots right into here and fits perfectly. So we can just go ahead and install this right in, and it fits perfectly flush with the case. Oh, do not forget our power switch. Very important not to forget the power switch. And go ahead and screw everything back down. Well, I'm going to call that the end of this video. As you can see, everything worked great, and I'm very happy that this is finally complete. So, with that being said, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and if you like this video, make sure you like and subscribe to the channel so you get notified when I upload next. If you'd like to send in your own console for repair, you can head to retroreviverepair.com to check out what we have to offer over there, and maybe even get your consoles feature on this channel. I'd like to thank you all for watching one more time, and I will see you in the next one. Bye-bye.